きな木が欲しい。I want a big tree. 大きな木があるといいな。ねえお母さん。窓から顔を出して薫が言いました。庭先で洗濯物を干していたお母さんは手を動かしながら答えました。Kinda where my passion for reading is coming from, because she read to me and my brother every night just before we were down. So I wanted to pass down the passion, my love for readings to my kids, and this experience really helped me create intimate bond with my kids. 外は本当にいい天気です。お山はどうしてなの？どうしてってねお母さん。大きくて高い木に登ってみたいと思わない？ But I want to create the space and a cafe like community place where I have lots of my books on the shelf and many different generations of people come and share the experience together and foster kind of reading community together, sharing space and having conversation over the books we read, and I would like to create such a space. Yeah. That's my dream after I retire. I'm feminist and a Marxist. And recently also thinking about environment, and so books which have social justice values and messages are important, but are not imposing, right? It's kind of taught, those values are taught in everyday settings, not threatening and but not fashioning, so to speak. But I collected books from many different cultures, translated into either Japanese or English, which are not, unfortunately, not easily available to many kids, right? Many like Disney films and those more cookie cutter style, commodified version of gender, race, ethnicity, those are widely available. Those important values not taught in major characters in dominant media, because that's a big no-no, right? Dominant ideology don't want to tell those. I was babysat by the TV when my parents worked as well, so but things not taught, right, in those mainstream, even though multiple reading is possible of those mainstream media, but picking up things which are excluded, kind of supplement, giving opportunity for kids to explore outside of the box, which are often given to or made available to kids. We as adults can make decisions, right, to put those on the bookshelf and read aloud. Widening the perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. It is about widening, but being really conscious about how to widen.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of parents are not very aware of how narrow the kinds of stories are that are being told to their kids, and also at school. The very narrow set of narratives that are given to kids, so that it becomes the parent's job really to work on expanding and providing that diversity.
Yeah.
And one of the things that struck me in what we were talking about was this question of how a book gets read. So it's not just a book itself on its own, but how the book gets read. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Right. So my English native speaker husband read English books to kids, and I read Japanese books, and I also chose English books, but the particular character of the person who is reading, right? So my partner is more playful and making things more humorous in Canadian way, but I'm more serious. So I also have books which are playing with words and Dr. Seuss style, and my partner is really good at, because that's how the book he kind of grew up with, and being read and reading multiple times, and then how his fond memories from his childhood facilitate him to have fun reading aloud the book to kids, kind of intergenerational, these fond memories, right, of particular relationship playing out in readings, that really stimulate my kids when kids are listening, right? And just not listening, but repeating the what's written. So when I was picking books and laying out this kind of selection of books, I also asked my husband and the kids to select the books, and when this book, so kids can repeat, right, what's written. It's many years ago that they read, and many books I read are more social justice, certain kind of political values associated with. So it's not a lot of books which are talking about or playing with words. It's not that repeatedly read, but those ideas are not unimportant. It's less frequent. Kids didn't go for those kind of more politically inspired books, but never refuse. They listen. It's not that they can repeat the content, but they have memories. They have relationship with the messages, and in actions, when they're interacting with something, environment or with people, I see some residue of those messages still in them. So it's not that they don't immediately react when I read, when kids are read this fun kind of playing with words books by my partner, they have this right, kind of more emotional immediate reactions, and I didn't often experience that when I read particular books, but different qualities, right, different characters of the people who are reading and communicating different messages. I think it's important that we are not the same. My husband and myself have different characters, and
You have also said at some point that you really see books as tools for parents. You've mentioned the idea of outsourcing to be able to support parents in supporting their kids and developing ethical approaches. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I don't know, because my individual experiences are limited. So, and many books, English and Japanese or in any language, the books kind of contain kind of values which are embedded in specific cultures, in specific temporalities. So I also learn. So like having external book as kind of medium to communicate, not telling personal stories, also puts me as kind of learners. So not creating kind of hierarchical, but I'm also exploring the stories, values together with kids. I like the kind of relationship, not top down or hierarchical, and we enjoy or we learn. But when we use the books, I also feel I'm running.
Mm-hmm. Something that struck me when you were sharing with me before we started recording was this attention both to what the kids need and what the parents need, because it's an interactive space. As you were just talking about this significance of a learning together, of this book being a tool for you to both learn, not for you to teach something perhaps to someone, but to approach in a more horizontal way. I noticed, you've talked. A lot of the selections that you brought with you today are particular kinds of topics that you're really keen as a parent to instill. The values and the ethics that are associated with them, to instill those in your children. What kind of advice would you give to somebody who's interested in turning their research into a children's book? What might they need to pay attention to in order to make that accessible not only to the child, and appealing to the child, but also to the parent?
Yeah, kids at the age of 7 or younger might not understand the kind of full meanings the messages embedded in a particular story. That's okay, right?
Yeah.
It's not the full meaning. What's full meaning anyway? Because multivocal readings, right? We know the audience receive different meanings, associations. So, but definitely, writing stories with fun or in good spirit, and also playful and be adventurous, not in a Hollywood film, Disney film way, but a bit of essences of fantasy, imaginary, not too far from kids' everyday life.
Was there ever a book, or you talked about feeling like you're a co-learner when you're reading with your kids? Is there a book that comes to mind that really had an impact on you, that really maybe changed your view on something, or that really helped you understand an issue that you care about better?
Well, one of the books, right? It's not just one book, but the most recent one. My PhD, Nanako, is working in rural Japan, and how the communities, aging and depopulating communities, struggling to sustain their livelihood with aging bodies, that the physical bodies cannot cope with the kind of agricultural practices they engaged over years. And now they are not maintaining the forest the way they did previously, and animals in the forest, lacking food in the forest, coming to the agricultural field. So they have these battles, so to speak, with deers, boars, right? Wild animals coming to eat the kind of food they grew. So it's just like when we talk about how snails eating our precious hostas or precious tomato plants, seedlings, how the aging older folks struggling with wild animals, it's a constant everyday struggles. But in that particular communities, a child wrote a book, and actually adults associated the story with these pictures. So this is the book, and at the end, the first grader, 6 years old, posed questions. Deer should have also share of the food we grow. Why we need to trap them and kill them as if they're evil species, like pests? That shouldn't be the case. That poses kind of ethical questions, right? Having not concrete answer, but really posing this kind of question is, stop and think, reflect, is important, I guess. Even we might not come to one conclusion, but collectively pause and think and at least share the moment, what can be done together on the same ground with kids.
And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what your kids growing up, did the characters, did the stories need to be relatable? And if so, how, or what enabled them, what did they need in order to really connect with the book?
Well, because I have two sons, I think many books I picked have a boy as main character, but a boy with kind of desired characteristics, not physically strong superhero, but strong in the sense that caring, not caring, small things, like parents or friends, but also older folks, or having kind of, right, both my husband and I collectively think about what counts as desired characteristics, but not that I wanted raise kids as feminist or pro-feminist. So I have lots of girl characters also with strengths in a sense that caring, right? Caring as strengths, not kind of physical strengths or being kind of Hollywood or style superhero or princess or but I building up, so it's not immediately telling boys the main character was girl. I think I spent some times more exploring with books which have boy as main character, but also many gender bending, both on the part of the boys, on the part of girls, and sharing this more transgender gay lesbian couples, like what kind of people can set up household together or loving relationship together, going over this heterosexual relationship. Those are incorporated at the younger stage as well. It's not that we introduce those when kids are a bit older. No. We started quite early.
Because I think sometimes people assume that if they're writing a book for children that they have to kind of dumb down the message. But I see you saying, no, that's not the case. So
being experimental, cultivating particular subjectivity, right? Being curious, being open, and experiment in certain situations, cultivating those curiosities, and learn from failures or successful stories, and learning from diverse species, their way of doing, being open, not only humans, but I think children's book in imaginary creative ways, when I look back, right, I found lots of different animals talking, right? And then, it's amazing that like we stop thinking like the bears don't stop or rabbits don't have conversations, but they do. But we kind of stop hearing, right? How they speak, communicate, and but kids' stories often having the animals and the other species as characters who are communicating, and I think we learn. Mm-hmm. We need to relearn those, right? Mm-hmm. How to learn from other species.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the key takeaways from this from this collection that you put together is just that the extraordinary value of having a diversity of narrators' voices, of protagonists with an array of characteristics, not only one particular kind of protagonist, but showing that diversity of class, of ethnicity, of bodily ability, but beyond the human as well.
Right. Yeah, because what we learned mm-hmm. the multiple ontologies or respecting like those as a graduate student. Mm-hmm. But when we are young, exposed to this kind of fantasy, semi-fantasy world, we are not having this Eurocentric, right, human-centered mindset. Mm.
That's inculcated. That's forced,
right.
That's forced upon us.
Right. Yeah. Over these particular ways of schooling, I guess. Mm.
Yeah.
So not one-sided or not limited range, mm-hmm. but I think made by these different qualities, different expression, types of interactions made possible, create the kind of conditions within which kids can explore, mm-hmm. right? I think that's really important. And